Nerd alert, nerd alert. It's almost time for season 2 of Our Nerdiest Thing, coming in March 2023. We will be reading Jennifer L. Armentrout's From Blood and Ash, and as always, we are spoiler friendly, so get to reading. I'm Whitney.
I'm Mindy.
And I'm Deb.
We're 3 best friends who love nerdy things.
Well, some people think we're nerdy, but we think we're pretty awesome.
This is Our Nerdiest Thing.
This season, we are discussing A Court of Thorns and Roses and all of Sarah J. Maas's books. We are spoiler friendly, so listen at your own risk. Hello, fellow nerds, and welcome to Our Nerdiest Thing. Today we are talking about A Court of Thorns and Roses, chapters 44, 45, and 46. It's the end of the book.
Sad face.
And an era.
Yeah, we did it. We already spun the wheel for our nerdiest recap. And it's me!
It's goddamn time.
In a minute. I'm going to be embarrassed that I did this.
I'm sorry, you don't get a minute. You get 30 seconds.
Oh yeah, I know. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start the timer and probably do a really terrible
You don't
job.
trust me to give you your countdown like last time when I did 2 and you had 7?
No, thank you. Okay, so Feyre stabs Tam Tam in the heart, and it's okay because his heart is made of stone. Hooray! She's freed the fairies, except not so much because Amarantha says no. And Amarantha basically beats her to death and tortures her. And then she finally figures out the answer to the riddle. It's love. And Tamlin kills Amarantha, and they bring Feyre back to life. And Rhysand does something weird, and they go home. Bye-bye.
You left out the, mating bond snapping into place.
Well,
was that the Rhys does something weird?
Yeah, I said Rhys does something weird because from Feyre's perspective, she doesn't know what that is. It's just Rhys doing something weird.
He stumbled.
He looked shocked. But we'll get there. So, will you please do our nerdiest vocabulary?
I would love to. I know you talked a lot about the sisters in our very first episode and did a little bit of the etymology, and I thought I would revisit that, and then I did look up in the Urban Dictionary for one character, and I realized that I hadn't done Feyre yet. So,
rookie mistake.
Right? Why didn't I lead with that? But really, the whole thing ends with her anyways. This is her thing. So, save the best for last or whatever. Feyre,
are you just doing this because she died and you feel bad?
Because she died?
Only for a couple minutes.
I know. I was going to say, she came back to life so quickly.
You acted so surprised. Wait, she died?
It barely even counts.
I don't know. She was swimming in the murky black waters.
That's true.
So most consider Feyre to mean beautiful, fairy, or elf, which I think is what you had mentioned before. But I did see one person from Canada, because those Canadians, who we love, because I love Canadian ice hockey too. So, but they said it means fair, swift, and huntress, which to me totally fit. So I did look up in the Urban Dictionary, and there really wasn't a whole lot, unfortunately. But there was a couple of the 2 that were there. They were pretty hilarious. So the first one is someone who is tired of Tamlin's possessiveness.
Well, then call me Feyre.
And then the other one is MILF from Agatar series, as in, dang, Feyre is a hottie. Too bad she's taken. And the funny thing about that is the person who submitted that, their tag name is Lucian's lover.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
And so since I didn't find a whole lot on Feyre, I thought I'd throw in a few other etymology things from some other characters just that we hadn't talked about. So Elaine means sun ray or fawn, and it's sometimes considered the English version of the French for Helen, which is Hélène. So that was kind of interesting. But definitely sun ray and fawn, I can totally see her. I picture her with fawn-like eyes and kind of that sort of deer in headlights look. So
confused as fuck.
Yeah. And then Nesta means pure. And it's actually, I didn't know this, but it's typically used as a pet name for Agnes.
What?
Did you look up Agnes?
A pet name for
I did look up Agnes. Yeah. Nesta, Agnes.
No,
I mean,
I don't get it. It's like saying the pet name for Deborah is
Rah rah.
for the love of
Rasta.
God, don't call me that.
And then finally, the last one, I never did Alice, and that means noble, which I thought was kind of
Oh,
cool.
she
'cause-
is noble.
And I just loved seeing her at the end of this too. I forgot we got to see her one last time.
And her nephews.
I know.
Yeah.
It's no
I noted
longer
that too.
giggling ghost apparitions.
They're real.
They're not creepy anymore.
I don't
Or
know.
maybe
They still
are.
could be.
Yeah.
Depends on if they look like brownies or not.
True. Do they have tree bark skin?
Oh, the fairy.
Tree bark skin.
Not the kind.
Like, what?
Not
I
the
forgot
kind
about
you
that.
eat.
I know. I forgot about that, and I thought you were talking about the dessert.
She's like, well, that sounds delicious.
I would enjoy that if they looked like brownies.
Giggling brownies, count me in. I mean, we can get you some of those.
Yeah.
Not in Kentucky, but
Oh, that's really funny. At the end of the last chapter, she's at the end of her final trial, and she stabbed Tamlin in the heart because she basically figured out his heart was made of stone, which I still think, I know we talked about this last time, but I still think that's super weird. Like, I didn't ever hear his heartbeat. That
I mean, but
It
yeah,
tracks.
are you ever listening for anyone's heartbeat?
I know.
No.
The only time I'm doing that is when I'm going, can you feel my heart beating? Do you understand?
I think the only time I'd feel for a heartbeat if I thought somebody was dying.
I know, like a medical emergency, yeah. Which I guess technically this is kind of a medical
yeah.
emergency. I did note, like, she stabs him, and, Reese is grinning from ear to ear, but it bothered me. I was really hard on Tamlin in these chapters, by the way. It really
I was
bothered
too.
me that he just was like, oh, you stabbed me, and wasn't like,
Ouchie.
I knew you could do it, or like, good job. It didn't see. She did not note that he looked relieved or proud of her
maybe it
or
fucking hurt
happy.
too, though.
Well, I'm sure it did.
Also, maybe he was
but-
like, what the fuck? You just stabbed me, dude.
well, like he wanted her to, for sure, right?
Yeah, but like, can you imagine? Like, think of the weird feelings you'd have about that, though, because you're like,
Yeah.
she just would have killed me.
I don't know. I just
Like, do you think he knew she figured it out? I feel like there
Yes.
was something in there that said he noticed when she figured it out. Like,
yeah, she looked at him like, really, and he
Like
gave
this,
her a
whoa,
look.
whoa, whoa,
whoa, whoa, what?
Stone, I tell you.
Yeah, I don't know. It bothered me that he wasn't like, it's okay. I knew you would figure it out.
You know, it's funny. Like,
you
I guess
did
I
it.
just expect that of Tamlin now because I didn't even notice that, but I definitely noticed that Rhys-Anne was grinning from ear to nose. I wrote,
I
"Oh,
know.
he's so proud of her."
Also, do you think he's also a little happy that Tamlin got stabbed?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, he hates Tamlin. So then Amarantha immediately is like, well, I mean, I guess it's fine that you did that, but I'm not going to let you go.
She's like, I didn't say when I was letting
Yeah,
you go.
Which Feyre had already figured out,
Right.
essentially.
But Amarantha saying that came across to me as something that I would have done to my little brother when we were kids. You know what I mean? Like, well, I said you could pick a show, but I didn't say when. Like,
I mean, Amarantha's not really known for her grace
Maturity.
and maturity.
Or maturity, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true. So then she starts to basically like beat the crap out of Feyre.
Wait, before that though, did you all notice that Jurian's eyes started going like berserk in
Yeah.
this thing?
I
thought how
did.
frightening and
Well,
horrifying.
do you
that
think it's
was.
because he was like, I'm free?
I don't know.
I don't know,
I don't
yeah.
think was Jurian a part of the curse
I mean, I don't know. We know that the finger bone and ring disappear at the
after,
end of this.
but after
Yeah.
Amarantha died. But that's
Right.
because the Adder took it.
Oh, he did.
I was
Yeah.
wondering
Okay.
who took that out.
The Adder takes it. We find that out in A Court of Mist and Fury.
I actually just reread that too, and I'm like, really?
Yeah, the Adder takes it and took it to Hybern, and that is how
Right.
Hybern was able to like reanimate Jurian. 'Cause the
And
Adder
remind
took it.
me, and I know we talked about this in a previous episode, but Jurian in A Court of Mist and Fury seems like a bad guy, but he's really not.
Yes, he's only in like the very end.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So can I ask also, have you ever heard anyone besides a villain use the word insolence? She said, I'm going to make you pay for your insolence.
Yeah, I've only ever
Yeah.
heard it from the bad guy.
Right. Because I feel like Amarantha really was like, you bitch.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? That's
Well, she went off.
Yeah,
Like,
she did.
Man,
She
she went off the
absolutely
rails.
when I'm that mad, I can't come up with good vocabulary.
Well, and I think back to what you were talking about last time, Deb, about the prolonged grief
Right.
disorder. And she wasn't living in reality. She had that magical thinking of like, I'm the super powerful, untouchable being, but she really isn't at all. And is like she's being forced to look at that
Do
in
you
that
think
moment.
she is in love with Tamlin or in love with the idea of him saying yes?
I don't think that I don't know that she actually loves truly. I think that Amarantha and Tamlin are very similar in that Tamlin believes that he truly deeply loves Feyre, but we see in his actions that he does not treat her.
He truly deeply loves himself.
Right.
Yeah.
And he thinks that he loves Feyre, but the way he acts is
And that's
opposite.
how I feel about Amarantha. I'm definitely getting into the psychology of these characters lately. So when I looked up, I thought, why, Amarantha totally loses her shit. And to your point, when she was saying, you said it felt like it was something you'd say to your brother, she throws a tantrum. She's acting like a toddler. She's screaming the same things over and over again. Say you don't love him. Say you don't love him. You're basically a piece of shit.
Well, and she realizes too, like none of the Fae are like cheering for her at this point.
Right. Like I loved seeing that. Like I actually noted that finally in one of these trials, their audience is on her side, you know, which was kind of cool. But I thought, well, what is it about love that makes you do crazy shit like that? And there's a few things that happen in your brain. One thing is it impairs your judgment. So a study showed that the area of your brain associated with judgments actually stops working when you're in love. So it would follow then that you would make illogical decisions, like be a crazy bitch like Amarantha. So it tracks for me because actually I've read something before that middle schoolers, parts of their brain shut down, and that's why they can't function.
That explains so much.
It does.
It really does.
And then the next one is love is actually an addiction. So the effect of being in love is comparable to the effect of the chemicals released when you take cocaine or heroin. But like passionate love can become an addiction, causing obsession and a euphoric feeling and loss of sleep. You will do dumb things to keep that euphoric feeling. So it's like a drug addict who'll, sell things or do dumb stuff. Like, I mean, a lot of people sell themselves.
Not out of love. Man.
Right. But to get that high so that they can get the drug and have that euphoric feeling. And then also when you're in love, there's a lot of risk taking involved. So that's because adrenaline is released when you're in love, which is kind of obvious, but it causes you to take reckless risks. And this can be traced back to when early humans, mostly males, would take risks or do crazy stunts to attract the opposite sex.
They still do that shit.
I know, right?
Peacocking.
The bigger the risk, the more likely a male would get a female to help him reproduce more risk-taking offspring. So like if the bigger the risk a male takes, they get, this woman to like procreate with them, and then they think that their like risk-taking abilities will pass on to their offspring. Such a weird thing. But that's what in ancient times they thought would do. So of course when you do that,
it hasn't gone away. I feel like.
I know. I felt like this sort of feels relevant. But, of course, that's going to come off as stupid. Like, I think of, hey, watch this.
Hold my beer.
Like, the worst thing you could hear somebody say is, hey, watch this. And then there's something stupid happens.
Think about, like, when you are, like, whenever you said peacocking, Whitney, like, when say you're at a bar and someone's trying to get your attention, right? But, I mean, honestly, women do it, too. Like, they come up and, do dumb shit. They press their boobs together.
Yeah.
Right? And I mean, we've joked all the time when we would go to the supernatural cons. We would always do a picture with Jensen Ackles and Jared Padalecki. Thank you. And we would joke because all weekend, I mean, it's cold in this hotel, right, where they're having this. Everyone's got like cute little sweaters on. And then as soon as that picture is about to happen, all the tits come out.
Yep.
I'm like, they're married.
Right, like they're gonna.
They
leave
don't want your boobs.
Yeah,
Right.
they're gonna leave their family because you wore a push-up bra.
Right.
Like, all
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
That tracks.
I'm like, hey, big boobs, McGee. Good job.
But finally, along this lines, there's a Psychology Today article that kind of asks, why do people do crazy things when they're in love? And the conclusion they came to is because they're scared. So when you're scared, it's hard to calm down and think straight. We rush to assumptions, and it's usually like a worst case scenario, instead of being okay with that sort of I don't know in between. So like you thinking like, why didn't he call me? Or why didn't she, return my call or whatever? And the not knowing about it makes us go crazy. if he or she ignores a text and the first thought is she doesn't like me, it's easier to jump to that conclusion than having the rationality to think through other options, like they're sick or they had to go to work, or coming up with kind of answer unknown, because nobody likes the unknown.
Right. And I mean, dating sucks.
I know.
It really does.
Not knowing is usually worse than knowing, even if the outcome is unpleasant. So like, even if what you know is bad, not knowing seems worse.
It's the same idea of what we've talked about before with scary movies, where it's always scarier in your own head than it is when you actually see the monster. Like, it's that same idea. Like, you can work yourself up into a worse tizzy, stress, whatever, just thinking about all the options than just knowing.
So, I mean,
it.
even if Amarantha doesn't truly love Tamlin, I feel like she thinks she does. And even if, in all this stuff, you got to think, like, if things like adrenaline or things like addiction come into play, because I feel like she's definitely addicted to power.
Oh, for sure.
So all those things that even, happen when you're in love also happen when you're power hungry or doing stuff like that. So either way, chemically, she's doing crazy shit because she's screwed up in the chemicals.
She's screwed up in the chemicals.
Yep, in the brain chemicals.
Aren't we all? So while Amarantha is torturing Feyre, basically, Feyre is kind of listing out the stuff that she's hearing and observing while she's like being beaten, essentially. And I wrote in all capital letters, "Where is Tamlin?" with the 3 question marks. And then I wrote...
He's got a cut.
I know, right?
He's hanging out.
I made a list right after that of, like, here's Rhysand. Someone cried out, which I think is probably safe to assume that it's Rhysand.
Well, she says it is.
Yeah.
Well, before she specifically says Rhysand screamed my name, she says someone cried out. And then Rhysand is screaming her name, yelled it as though he cared. He grabs the Ashwood dagger. He lunges for Amarantha's throat. He gets knocked back. He lunges toward Amarantha again with his talons out. He hits her like protective shield and has his talons forced back in by Amarantha's magic. He gets knocked down again, and then he gets hit with wave after wave of Amarantha's power. And through all that, where is Tam Tam?
Well, and nobody else helps him, which he kind of set up himself, to make himself hated like that.
Right.
So there's so much of a psychology behind, for example, medication with a placebo effect, right? And a lot of people improving with a sugar pill. Mm-hmm. And so much of that comes with confidence, right?
Mind over matter.
Right, mind over matter. And for the record, I'm going to go ahead and say I work for the National MS Society, and I do think medications work, so I just want to put that out there. And I'm on a lot of medication that does work. Having said that, do you think Tamlin thought, I still don't have enough power? Because he cowers to Amarantha for 40, 50 years, right?
Yeah.
So he never tries to rise up against her. So is he just terrified of her?
I am not sure that he's really terrified of her. I think that he definitely has a lot of emotional complexity when it comes to her because she is so intertwined with his dad and his family that he, I think, has really mixed feelings about.
But if he hates them so much, you think he'd want her gone?
I don't know that he does hate them that much,
I think he doesn't have the mental fortitude. I don't know. He just gives up so easily.
Problem-solving skills. He doesn't go into fight or flight. He goes into flight every time.
He thinks there's this one thing, and if it doesn't work, well, fuck it, we're screwed. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't, like you say, problem solve. He doesn't think out of the box. He doesn't, try something else or, why don't we push through this and see? He just gives up so easily.
Well, and at this point, the masks are still on too, right? Mm-hmm. So he
knows the curse isn't broken.
Right. I could see an argument for he thinks he knows that he still doesn't have enough power to really take Amarantha on and win. So he's waiting. But then again, if you're just waiting for Feyre to either die or do it for you, then what are you doing?
Right. What did he expect to happen in that moment while he did nothing? And he sees that Rhysand is doing something. That didn't prompt him to go, maybe I should stand up.
Right.
Just stand up, dude.
Right.
And even when he does say something to Amarantha, when he comes,
please don't stop it.
It's whiny and
don't kill her. I
kind of
love
half-ass.
her.
Yeah.
I wrote that down too. Like, Rhysand, that big long list of all these things Rhysand is doing, and he's getting like pummeled by Amarantha. And Tamlin goes over and starts begging, but he doesn't actually like talk about Feyre at all. But she doesn't have anything to do with the stuff that he's saying.
While Amarantha is like pummeling Rhysand, why didn't Tamlin use that distraction to his advantage and stab her? She's obviously focused on Rhysand.
That's a timeless question
that we may never know the answer to.
We may never know the answer to. Yeah. He doesn't say any. I mean, he does go. He crawls over to Amarantha and begs, but he doesn't say anything about Feyre. He doesn't crawl over to Feyre like Rhysand was trying to do, right? And Feyre speaks up for Rhysand. Like when she is being beaten and tortured, she speaks up for Amarantha to stop with Rhysand. Not to stop for her, not to release Tamlin, but to stop hurting Rhys, which I really enjoy. And so then Amarantha breaks her spine, basically, and kills Feyre. And the only reaction that Tamlin has is his eyes go wide when she dies.
But while she's dying, she goes, "Love."
The answer to your riddle
is love. Apparently, she was 90 when she died.
I know. and then she passes away. I did want to read at this point. Feyre dies, right? And if you're not a first time reader, you know that she comes back to life. And I wanted to just read a quick little thought, I guess, that Feyre has while she is sparring with Cassian in book 2. This is in chapter 30 of A Court of Mist and Fury. And she's having this conversation with Cassian where he is like, you left Tamlin for good. Like, how you doing with that? And she starts to think about, well, probably not great. How am I doing with that? And she gets really upset.
But I just reread that book, and he's like the only one with the balls to ask her.
I know.
Which I think it kind of makes you start falling in love with Cassian.
I love Cassian, yeah. She says, I had done everything for that love. I had ripped myself to shreds. I had killed innocents and debased myself. And he had sat beside Amarantha on that throne. And he couldn't do anything. Hadn't risked it. Hadn't risked being caught until there was one night left. And all he'd wanted to do wasn't free me, but fuck me.
Yeah. And it's the first time she's ever used the F word too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
Yeah.
But she does. She literally dies, and he is not doing anything. And then, she dies, and he's just like, no.
But also, spoiler alert, as soon as she's alive again, he just fucks her.
Dude, I have things to say about that.
Right, yeah. But, I'm like, okay, so you're cradling her in your arms. That's not really enough, dude.
Right.
You don't even give her the first ember of life. It doesn't even occur to you to go, maybe I should ask all the high lords around me to save her. Which one does it first? Autumn Court, which to me is so surprising, right? Knowing what we know.
The whole thing was surprising me. I didn't realize it happened so quickly. I thought there was, in my mind, they all gathered and huddle and were like, hey, should we do this? Okay, well, maybe, but I don't want to do it, but okay. And then they all go and do it. They just start coming and doing it. I'm like, damn.
In A Court of Mist and Fury, we find out that Rhysand spoke to all of them mind to mind while Tamlin was crying on the floor.
While Tamlin was doing nothing.
While Tamlin was being a little bitch.
He tells Feyre later that I would have forced them to do it if I had to, but they were all so shell shocked that they were just whatever. Right. And they all very easily agreed to do it because they were just too.
It's time for me to read A Court of Mist and Fury again.
It was really good. So can we talk a little bit about how Amarantha dies? Because when I was rereading this week, it says that Tamlin takes a sword and shoves it through her face so hard that he impales her head on stone.
I did not remember that.
She is fucking hanging from the wall underneath Claire Better.
I know,
by the way.
Noticed that too.
Underneath Claire, hanging by her face.
Yep. And then guess what he does? He bites her because that's what he does.
Right. Yeah. He's like, is it
her throat.
Is it Callan May? I think I need to bite her throat. Because I got to do that to everybody. But yeah, I thought
it was brutal.
It was great poetic justice, but it was really violent.
Yes.
Because he didn't have to stab her in the face.
Well,
maybe he's trying to make up for all the shit he didn't do.
Maybe.
Well, I just think about the difference differences over and over and over between Tamlin and Rhysand, right? Like Rhysand has this ability to kill somebody very quickly, very cleanly, and very it's like hidden and not in your face, right? Because it's like inside their mind. And Tamlin is so
brute force.
Yes, and it's always right up in your face. Like I want everybody to see exactly what I've done and what I'm doing and what I'm capable of.
Well, it's because he's insecure.
Well, yeah.
I mean, Rhysand, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Why does he always put his hands in his pocket? Rereading Mist and Fury the last couple weeks, I noticed he still does it there.
Yeah.
And he does it when he is trying to seem nonchalant. And it's usually when he's most tense, right? And most upset. And so, like, he does need people to know that he's wicked, but he doesn't need it to be like ripping someone's throat out, right? Which is, again, so much scarier.
But here's the thing, too, like, that's not either of their fault. Like, that's just their power. So, like, it's not Tamlin's fault that that's how he does it, because that's his power. He's the beast form.
But his power is not impaling somebody on the stone with a sword.
Well, no, he definitely went overboard.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
but I'm just saying, like, if
he does have 3 months of pent up emotion.
That's true. But I mean, if he's going to kill somebody, he's going to be in beast form. He's going to rip them to shreds. That's his power. That's what he does.
Also, I was trying to figure out with a beast paw how he caught the sword. Did you guys think about that?
I did not. I did not think about that.
A big cat's paw, and it's like, like you can't. It just like slips.
I picture he bats it out of the air. Oops.
Yeah. I don't know. I just feel like with Rhysand's mind power, he probably has the ability to like make your head explode, or like, Indiana Jones style, like face melting and coming out your eye sockets.
He totally
and
does.
Grossness.
That'd be really cool.
You know what I mean? Like, they definitely have very different powers.
Yeah.
But they just approach situations so differently.
Yeah.
And Tamlin is always just...
Well, it's because Rhysand is clever. And, you know what I mean?
He's definitely
very,
smarter
very smart.
than Tamlin.
Right. And I mean, Tamlin...
way more strategic.
But I mean, I guess it would be true for the both of them that they were raised to be warriors, but Tamlin never took the time to also be a scholar, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he doesn't know very much about other people's lands, right? He has his assumptions.
Well, and he never wanted to be in that position, so he didn't care to like train to be in that position.
Well,
but again, once you're in that position, maybe you try to do a good job.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Well, in A Court of Mist and Fury, Rhysand talks about his mom when they're talking, when he, Cassian, and Azrael are telling Feyre about like growing up together basically in the Illyrian war camps. Rhysand says, my mom wanted to make sure that I'd never relied on just like my strength or just my power. Like she was the one who tutored him and like schooled him and taught him all this stuff. And we don't really Tamlin doesn't talk that much about his background and his upbringing the way that we get to hear Rhysand. And it makes me wonder what's in Sarah J's head when she's writing this stuff, right? Like, what does she envision as Tamlin's upbringing versus Rhysand's upbringing, you know?
I envision, again, this is not canon, it's just what I envision based off what we know, a whole lot of fighting and fucking, and that's it. Like, they probably trained all the time out in the field and then came home and fucked some chicks and ate food.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't know anything about diplomacy. He doesn't know anything about his people. Yeah. He doesn't understand, like, he can't, in the next book, he has a tithe. They're back for, like, how long? Wait, like a month, maybe?
3.
Yeah,
3
and
months.
So 3 months is enough time for you to build up your whole riches again, right? You probably need to give me some money. Yeah. I did nothing for you for 50 years, but if you could go ahead and give me some money, and if not, sorry, we're going to kill you.
Yeah, I have special rights to hunt you.
Right.
Yeah, it's awesome. So while Tamlin is attacking Amarantha, Feyre is dead, basically, and she is seeing through Rhysand's eyes. And I
was asking, so she's actually dead, or is he like? I feel like something like he's like actually just holding on to like the last bit of her soul or something.
That's
through the mating bond or through the bargain bond.
It's through the mating bond.
Okay,
but she thinks it's through the bargaining bond. The bargain bond is, I think, just a ploy for covering the mating bond because he doesn't want anybody.
I mean,
to
really,
know
all
about
the
it.
bargain,
but he didn't know at that point.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, he does.
I thought that he finds out when it snaps into place at the end of this chapter.
He assumed she was his mate.
I'm gonna touch on this.
Okay. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
But I think the bargain, like when you're talking about the tattoo, is really just the yes, I will come to your court once a week.
Yes.
I mean, that's all it is. It doesn't typically have
yeah.
any other, you wouldn't be able to like talk to each other through it and stuff like you can theirs.
I mean, I would assume not, but I also,
I guess so.
I don't know if they can just because they're mates or just because Rhysand has that power to talk to your mind anyway, you know?
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. That has not been established. I feel like if that's a Rhys thing or if that's a mate thing. I don't know.
It feels like it would just be a Damati thing.
Yeah. I guess.
But she wouldn't be able to feel him. You know what I mean?
Right.
Without
Without
be
the
able to-
mating bond? Or-
Right. And
Yeah,
like she,
yeah.
can feel, like everything
Because it's
that she
reciprocal.
feels, right, is the mating bond. But she thinks it's just the bargain, and it's not like she would be like, "Well, how come I'm feeling this?" She just assumes it's the bargain.
Right. That's true.
Right, because she has no idea. Yeah. So, Tamlin does all that horrifying thing stuff. Tamlin does all that horrifying thing stuff to Amarantha. And I wrote down, and then and only then he sobs over Feyre's body.
But isn't it so sad that she says, "I wanted to touch him to beg for his forgiveness for what I'd done, for the other bodies on the floor, but I was so far away." Not, "I love Tamlin. We're finally
know.
back."
I wrote that down
She's
too.
like, "I am so worried about what he's going to think about this."
Her first
Yeah.
thought is she wants forgiveness. That's how broken she is. Like she
Right.
can't even like think about, enjoying
And
anything. And
ultimately, Tamlin doesn't give a fuck that she did that.
I know.
Yeah.
He never brings it up. He never lets her talk
They
about it.
literally never talk about it.
Right.
It's crazy.
He does try, I think.
A
and
little
then
bit at the end here.
Yeah, and then she's like not ready for it, but then he never brings it up again. Like,
Yeah.
dude, read the room.
So the High Lords give a kernel of their power to bring Feyre back. And Rhysand says, "For what she gave, we'll bestow what our predecessors have granted to few before. This makes us even." And I wondered, is he talking to Tamlin or is he talking to Feyre?
thing.
Like, this makes us even. Like, what?
See,
does that
Feyre says
mean?
she felt like a twinkle of humor, which
Yeah.
seems inappropriate for the moment.
Uh-huh.
So
I
that makes
agree.
me think it was maybe towards Feyre because that's how he interacts with her. But I don't know. It seems more appropriate that it goes towards Tamlin.
Yeah, if he was telling Feyre, "This makes us even," to me, that would suggest that he's like, you know what, forget about the coming to my court
Right.
once a month or whatever for a week.
Which he
every
doesn't
month.
do, though, until she begs him to in Court of Mist and Fury.
Yeah.
He stays away until she...
Well, she doesn't specifically ask for him. She's just
Well,
like,
I know.
I do not want to get married.
But he
And he's
definitely
like,
stays...
"Hey."
He doesn't call in that bargain until he hears her begging for help.
Yes,
Right. He
that's
says
true.
he's going to try to stay away from her.
Yeah.
As long as she's happy,
Yeah.
he says he'll
he
stay
thinks,
away.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
thinks that she's happy. So she comes back to life, Feyre, and immediate.
Dun, 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 dun.
Okay, so as I'm reading this, who doesn't want to come back to life? If I come back to life, I hope I get to swim through sparkling wine.
I know that does sound.
Doesn't
kinda
that sound
nice.
amazing?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then you're like taller, thinner,
Your
stronger.
fingers are pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
more
glow.
beautiful. Your
Right.
hair is more luscious.
I'd
or
be like, oh, am I
lustrous.
just drunk? Or did I just turn fey?
She's drunk on berry wine, is what it is. The whole time she was never a fae. She's just drunk on berry.
Yeah.
wine.
Well, and like almost immediately, she's thinking, I killed them, slaughtered them. I hadn't even seen their bodies being taken away. Like you were just saying, Mindy, it's immediate, like guilt, denial of the reality of her situation. And like, I can't even process what's going on. I can only think about this one aspect of it, And it's just, it's
Can
rough.
I say that, Tamlin lets everybody kneel to him?
Mm-hmm.
And her, because instead of being like, "Hey, Feyre, I bet you're exhausted because you just died. I'm gonna let everyone bow to me, and then I'm gonna fuck you."
Well, and she says, after a while, Tamlin at last noticed my dull eyes and
Yeah.
my silence, and
After
then
he
leads
let
her away.
everyone worship him.
Well, and you know what makes me mad about that is I am rereading A Court of Wings and Ruin, and I just finished the part of the High Lords meeting where Tamlin shows up and is a total douchebag to everybody. And one of the things that he says is, why are we listening to Rhysand and Feyre? Because they probably just want to set themselves up as like high king and high queen of Prithian. And I'm like, but you under the mountain are the one, like you just said, everyone's bowing to you, and you're like, yes,
He was
yes,
fine
my
on
girlfriend.
that.
Thank
He was
you.
fine on that dais.
Right.
He never really seemed bothered by it.
And it bothered me that people were coming up and thanking him anyways. Like,
Right, what the
she
fuck
did
did
all
he
the fucking
do?
work.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, he killed her, but like, he killed Amarantha. But
Also, it was his fault they were there.
I know. So I thought, I mean, it was sort of an afterthought. She's like, and they were thanking me, but like, they were coming up and like kissing Tamlin's ass, and I'm like, what the hell is going on here?
literally almost.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see an argument for like, well, you know, if Tamlin hadn't kept sending out his people to find the person that killed the you know what I mean? Like, he had to get her and bring her. However, that is the extent of what he did.
Knowing also
That is
though
it.
that it's a patriarchal
Oh
society.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
They're gonna thank him before they
Oh
thank
yeah.
her.
Well, again, in Wings and Ruin, in that same High Lord meeting, Baron from Autumn Court is like such a tool and ignores the women and
Right.
doesn't want to talk to any of them and calls Feyre human filth. And I mean, it's all just
I
it's
need to
horrible.
back up just a second because I noted something and I just thought it was so funny. When the mask falls off and she sees Tamlin for the first time, like full face, she goes, "That lovely straight nose." And I'm like, Feyre, you sure know how to flatter a man. Like,
His nose did not have a bump on it.
it was
Thank
so
God.
straight.
Exactly how I had imagined it would be.
And she did say it's exactly how she dreamed he would be.
Can I talk about
No.
though that
Right.
Lucian's mask falls off first and he's crying?
I know.
Like weeping because he's so thankful, and like Lucian doesn't get enough credit for
I know.
really feeling all of this in the moment. But what he doesn't get credit for is also telling Tamlin, like, maybe you should take Feyre and let her rest.
Right.
He's still Tamlin's little bitch.
Yep.
Yep.
The only one that can like make good decisions, really, between the two of them.
And here's the thing too, when he does that, because I noted, he goes in and he has all these meetings and she's like just sitting there like off to the side and like killing herself in her own guilt. Like just
You mean in the next book or
No, in this time. So before they go and spend time with Feyre, before
that's right.
after all this happens, he goes and he's like, before he even makes sure she's okay, he's meeting with all the other High Lords. They go in and they do High Lordy things, and I feel like Rhysand would not have done that. He
Right.
would have been like, "I'll get to you all later.
Right, what the
I'm going to
fuck
go
do we
make
have to
sure
talk about
Feyre's
right now?"
exactly." Like
Yes.
I 100% believe that that's a difference between them.
Oh yeah, no, I would totally agree with that. So Tamlin takes her away from everybody into a room, just the two of them, and she is still just like so overwhelmed with guilt. I should be on my knees weeping with shame for all that I had done. And this is where, Mindy, you were saying he's trying to talk to her like, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah.
She's like, no, it literally just happened. I don't want to talk about
Well,
it.
and she also says, he wasn't human and neither was I, and I wasn't certain whether I was happy about that or not.
I know.
Like, so she's got the guilt too of not really being excited that they brought her back to life.
Yeah. Right.
Because in her point of view too, now she has to face everything that she did.
Well,
Yep.
right now she's like feels like she's going to jump out of her skin because her body's changed so much and she can't can you imagine how disorienting that is? Not only is
Yeah.
she overcome with guilt, but she can't even like walk right. Like she's like trying to figure out her limbs. And,
It reminds me of I had forgotten that she like struggles with that a little bit because Nesta and Elaine have the exact same experience when they get turned. Like Nesta comes out of the cauldron and immediately goes for Elaine to make sure she's okay, and it says like she falls down
Yeah.
because she like her body is so different immediately.
Right.
It's just crap you have to deal with on top of all the other crap that she still has to deal with. Like
yeah.
So, it talks about how when she woke up, all the blood was gone, right? The bodies were gone. Do you think they showered before they had sex? Because he talks about being down by her thighs and stuff. And I'm like, is she still in that tunic that she wore into the mountain? Because she also hasn't bathed in days. And you're down there by her hoo-ha?
I'm gonna assume that for her at least, the power of the High Lords bringing her back probably cleaned her body,
Like cleansed her.
Did-
Yeah.
but
Tamlin
probably not her
cleanse?
clothes. Not Lord, no. Of
Right.
course he
He's
did.
probably got like dick cheese.
He tried to make out with her after he had just had sex with somebody else with
That's right.
the great right stuff.
Yeah, because I talked about
Yeah.
someone else's
Yeah,
juices.
he's
That was
not-
early podcast.
the OG. Yeah, and she has. So he wants to talk or gives her the chance to talk, and she isn't ready to do it, and so she has sex with him instead of talking.
Did you notice too? Like he's trying to be maybe not as like forceful, and then when she sort of says it's okay, he bites her, and then she realizes that that's his signal that he's getting impatient. I'm like, really, dude?
I didn't like that
put your
either.
dick in your pants.
Well, and this whole interaction between the two of them continues for months until she leaves to go to the night court. Like, they don't talk about anything. And they have sex instead.
Well, he pretty much says, like, this is High Lord's work.
Yeah.
Why don't you go pick flowers?
Yep.
Let Ianthe tell you what flowers to have at our
book
wedding.
2.
Right.
Yeah. So then she falls asleep and wakes up to a gentle tug and realizes Rhysand is like beckoning her basically through the bond.
Did you notice when she got up, she said, I prayed I would ever sleep that peacefully again, when she sees how peacefully Tamlin's...
Right, he's sleeping just fine.
Yeah, he doesn't even wake up.
He doesn't have any issues.
And just for her to say, I prayed I would ever get to sleep that peacefully again.
Well, and she says, like, once she goes to Rhysand, like, she goes, like, what do you want? And she meant to say, like, what do you want?
Yeah.
Right? And she remembers, it says, I remembered how he fought again and again to attack Amarantha to save me.
I know.
Baby Rhysand.
I know.
Daddy Rhysand. Did you get it right?
He feels like a baby Rhysand here.
So he
sweet.
basically is like, I just wanted to check on you, right? And she's like, why did you do any of those things? And he says, I didn't want you to fight alone or die alone. And I wrote a big heart with that. And they basically just like kind of talk and are just like normal people with each other for a second. And he asks her how she's doing, and she actually tells him, where she wouldn't or couldn't do that with Tamlin.
I loved in that moment too when he tells her, when she asks him why. In the beginning he says, because when the legends get written, I didn't want to be remembered for standing on the sidelines and all that stuff. And it's just like, he doesn't just want to be remembered as Amarantha's whore, but also he loves her.
I know.
Yeah, he also says, because, you know, when she does open up to him about everything, about her body being clean and shining, and it's a mockery of what she's done, he says, be glad of your human heart, Feyre. Pity those who don't feel anything at all. And he's the only one in this whole book that's told her that it's okay to be human.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean,
That's true.
honestly, even her sisters were like, you have too much of a bleeding heart. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and he loves her for that.
Yeah, I hadn't ever put that together. That's true.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
And then his eyes open all wide, and he's like, what?
Yeah,
What?
so he's getting ready to leave, and then he went rigid. And not in a fun way. His eyes locked on mine, wide and wild, and his nostrils flared. Shock, pure shock, flashed across his features at whatever he saw on my face, and he stumbled back a step. Actually stumbled. So, of course, I look to A Court of Mist and Fury, chapter 54. And so Rhysand talks about this in the final trial with Feyre. It's kind of long. Seeing you bleeding and screaming undid me. It broke me at last. And I knew as I picked up that knife to kill her, I knew right then what you were. I knew that you were my mate and you were in love with another male and had destroyed yourself to save him, and that I didn't care. If you were going to die, I was going to die with you. I couldn't stop thinking it over and over as you screamed, as I tried to kill her. You were my mate, my mate, my mate. But then she snapped your neck. Tears rolled down his face, and I felt you die. And this beautiful, wonderful thing that had come into my life, this gift from the cauldron, it was gone. In my desperation, I clung to that bond, not the bargain. The bargain was nothing. The bargain was like a cobweb. But I grabbed that bond between us and I tugged. I willed you to stay on, to stay with me. Because if we could get free, then all 7 of us were there. We could bring you back. And I didn't care if I had to slice into all their minds to do it. I'd make them save you. You'd free us. You had freed us with your last breath and my power. I wrapped my power around the bond, the mating bond. I could feel you flickering there, holding on. So Amarantha died, and I spoke to the High Lords mind to mind, convincing them to come forward to offer that last spark of power. None of them disagreed. I think they were too stunned to think of saying no. And I again had to watch as Tamlin held you, kissed you. I wanted to go home to Valaris, but I had to stay to make sure things were set in motion, that you were all right. So I waited as long as I could. Then I sent a tug through the bond. Then you came to find me. I almost told you then, but you were so sad and tired. And for once, you looked at me like I was worth something. So I promised myself that the next time I saw you, I'd free you of the bargain because I was selfish and knew that if I let you go right then, he'd lock you up and I'd never get to see you again. When I went to leave you, I think transforming you into Faye made the bond lock into place permanently. I'd known it existed, but it hit me then. Hit me so strong that I panicked. I knew that if I stayed a second longer, I'd damn the consequences and take you with me, and you'd hate me forever. I landed at the night court right as Moore was waiting for me, and I was so frantic, so unhinged that I told her everything. I hadn't seen her in 50 years, and my first words to her were, "She's my mate." I told myself, "You were happy. I should let you be happy, even if it killed me. Even if you were my mate, you'd earn that happiness."
So part of my nerdiest thing of the week is when I was re-listening to this on audiobook this week, at like midnight, I was laying on the couch, like crying, listening to this whole exchange because, I mean, it's just so emotional.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. Especially that for me, it's like once again, had to watch Tamlin hold you and
Right.
Tamlin kiss you and you be excited to see him again. And it's just like, oh my gosh. That sucks. It's also the opposite of what Amarantha had screamed at her, right? Like, you don't deserve to be happy. You don't deserve, to be with any of these high fae. You're just a filthy human. And he's like, no,
which is
deserve to be
interesting because
happy.
all the other High Lords thought that she was worthy of being high fae.
Yeah. See, I think it's funny that he's like, none of them disagreed. I literally feel like none of them even like thought about it. They're just like, whatever.
Okay.
Sure.
Thanks
Can
for
I go
saving
home
us.
now? Yeah, that's great. So then Rhysand leaves.
Actually, really quick, the other sweet thing that I thought that Rhysand said when he's talking and he's like bearing more of his soul to her than he normally does, and she's asking about the flying and why he's not flying and or why nobody knows about it, and he says, "Everything I love has always had a tendency to be taken from me. I tell very few about the wings or the flying." But like, and then in that moment, then that happens. He's like, "Oh, I just feel so bad for him."
Yeah.
Sweet baby Rhysand.
But it all worked out. So they go back to Spring Court, and I loved that Feyre, she's basically thinking, I've been through a lot of crap, but I made it. I brought us both home.
Yeah.
It's like she gave herself the credit, even for just a second, right? Like, she doesn't, it's not like, well, Tamlin brought me to Prithian. Tamlin let me overhear those conversations. It was like, no, I did that. And you're welcome. And I really liked that. Again, I feel like that's just one little tiny scrap of hope that like she's going to figure it out and be okay eventually.
But then she also says there would be tomorrow and an eternity to face what I'd done.
I know.
So then she's like thinking, well, shit, I've got all kinds of time to mull this over.
To think about.
To be broken.
To relive, killing these people over and over again. I wrote, we see the nephews with multiple exclamation
I put, Alice and her boys.
I did not remember that we ever saw them again. So
I think it's funny that Lucian calls him to dinner. I imagine him with this big dinner bell. Dinner time! Because she does. She says, Lucian called us to dinner. And I'm like, what? When has Lucian ever been the like bringer of dinner news?
Yeah, I feel like never. But yeah, I wrote down too, she and Tamlin have basically not talked at all. Sex and silence, and that is it. And that
They don't
that
even
continues.
sleep in the same room most of the time.
He sleeps with her in her room a lot, but he always has his own space.
Yeah.
Right.
Forever. Yeah. And
Right.
he stopped sleeping in her bed because nightmares wake him up, and he like
Right. Poor guy.
wakes up as his like beast creature sometimes, I think. And so she says that he like sleeps not on the floor, or maybe he gets up and paces or something, but she's like, he doesn't even sleep in the bed.
He was getting woken up because she was puking her guts out.
Yeah.
Well, he pretended like he was asleep.
He pretended
acted
it was
like
his
he was
problem.
asleep. But I wanted to talk about this ending with you guys because the first time that I read this book, I feel like you read it and, they go home and they're standing on this beautiful grassy hill and looking at the beauty of Spring Court, and they're home and they're back and they beat, the villain, and they're the heroes of the day, and, they get to live happily ever after. Right. And then this time it's like, ooh, they have not talked at all. She is extremely unhappy. He seems completely oblivious to it. He is kind of like weirdly unaffected by stuff. Like he sleeps so soundly, like we were saying a few minutes ago, and it, you know, she's in denial and avoidance and like does not want to deal at all, and that causes a lot of problems for her later, right? And when the first time I read A Court of Mist and Fury, you know, it starts off with her having a nightmare and running to the bathroom and puking, right? And the first time I read that, I was like, what? Like, what is going on, you know? And so I just think it's really interesting that this writing of the end of this first book is so subtle that it feels like it's a happy ending. But when you think about it a little bit deeper, you're like, no, this is not.
And I even wrote, like, I thought it was weird that she still considered Springcourt home. Mm-hmm. Like, she even feels it in her soul, like, when they get there, that this feels like home or whatever. But it was, like, night and starlight and all that stuff that she was sent with the music and all those images and things that actually are always the things that bring her sort of out of her funk or whatever. And I thought that was interesting that she still felt so drawn to Springcourt.
Yeah, and see, I
think it was the only place she felt safe.
True.
I don't know that she actually feels drawn anymore, but it's like, well, what else am I going to do? Where else am I going to go?
But I mean, she does say it feels like home. Yeah. Like she felt like,
that's
you
true.
know.
Well, and
even when she's dying, when she's trying to think of good things, all she thinks about is the times in Springcourt when she was with Tamlin.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. She did have some good times.
Yeah.
With Tamlin.
The one time.
That one time he kissed her eyelids in the glen.
That one time. I did look up the endings to other Beauty and the Beast stories and Cupid and Psyche. So we talked about this when we went through Psyche's impossible tasks. But basically in all of those other stories, which are different versions of this story, right? It's all happily ever after. They get married. They are together. And Psyche, in the Cupid and Psyche story, Psyche becomes immortal. She becomes the goddess of the soul. She and Cupid are together, married, and they have a daughter. And all the Beauty and the Beast stories, all of them end essentially with Beauty finding the Beast at just the right moment before he's going to be killed or die. She saves his life in various ways, and they get married and live happily ever after. Like, that's it. And I feel really stupid saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. So I was thinking about that, and I'm like, okay, so obviously you're supposed to think, like, Tamlin, he's the Beast, right? Like, that's his beast form or whatever. The beast form is the Beast. That's a stupid thing to say. And they don't get married, right? And I was so pissed the first time I read this book when I realized, like,
really?
I was
like, it wasn't going to be a happily ever after.
I wasn't sure if it was going to be a happily ever after, but it was very clear that it wasn't going to be a happily ever after with Tamlin, right? Mm-hmm. And I was so mad. Like, what was the point of all of freaking book one? Like, that is genuinely how I felt. And then yesterday I was thinking about it, and I was like, oh, Rhysand is actually the Beast.
Why do you think that?
Because, okay, maybe this isn't stupid then. Okay, good. Okay, so Rhysand is actually the Beast, I think, because Rhysand fits. First of all, he turns into a beast too, just not the one that looks like the Disney Beauty and the Beast. He has a beast form. He at first is like horrible villain. He's got the whole kidnapping her thing with the bargain, taking her to the night court, but ultimately is a good person deep down and has a complete other side to him that only she can bring out.
And Tamlin is Gaston.
Tamlin is Gaston. I mean, he is.
Yeah, like when you said that, I was like, well, who would Tamlin be?
He is.
Gaston.
Right.
Self-centered.
Yeah.
Arrogant.
And then
only thinks of himself.
Beauty and the Beast, Rhysand, they get together and live happily ever after she becomes immortal.
And Gaston wants to have Belle and wants to marry her.
Yep.
But doesn't get her.
And in the Cupid and Psyche story, Cupid goes to, I think it's Jupiter.
And you brought up Jupiter the other day, and every time you say it, I'm like, boys, go to Jupiter to get more stupider.
You know, I saw a TikTok the other day. They said boys go to Jupiter to get more stupider. And then the response was, girls go to hell. It made me laugh. Anyway, Cupid asks for others' help to make Psyche immortal. And Rhysand is the one that makes Feyre immortal.
He's the one that asks for the help. Yeah.
Yes, he's the one that asks for the help to make her come back to life, basically. And so I was like, I've always thought of it is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. Like, Tamlin does fit the Beast in a lot of ways, but ultimately, Rhysand is the Beast.
I want to know if you've blown any listeners' minds with this.
I know.
I was thinking about it yesterday, and I was like, is this going to be one of those things where they're like, yeah, duh. Like, how have you not figured that out?
I never thought of it that way.
Will it be the FF of the moment where we should just get it?
I was worried about that.
No, like, I guess I thought, yeah, that was the Beauty and the Beast part. And then she puts a spin on it and twists it. And then we have the other books and Rhysand become, like in my mind, that's what it was. But you're right. Like, if you take it as a whole, if you look at the works as a whole, yeah. That makes total sense.
Well, because A Court of Mist and Fury is always like, well, that's the Hades and Persephone, right? Like, Rhysand is the Hades. And that's also true. That also applies. But I think Rhysand is Hades and Cupid. All right, let's take a quick break and come back and do a quick wrap up talking about the book as a whole. Mindy has an Our Nerdiest Vocabulary wrap-up for Season 1.
Number 1, there are some polarizing views about Rhys on Urban Dictionary, right? And then secondly, we found out that some Christian people actually name their kid Adder, which means venom. Third, we found out that Amarantha is vegan and loves to give head, according to the Urban Dictionary.
She likes meat, just not beef.
Gross.
And finally, none of us were pronouncing bogey correctly because the actual pronunciation is kind of icky.
Bogey?
We didn't really like bogey.
It's still bog in my head.
So I will say I texted Mindy a couple weeks ago when I was re-listening to Mist and Fury, and they call it a bog.
But we found out that
we don't give a fuck.
This is a Niktos situation.
Yes, it is. Well, I guess that's the final thing we learned about our nerdiest vocabulary is that, it might be what it's supposed to be, but that doesn't mean it's what is in our head.
Well, and the author...
And it's okay.
The author may not be a word nerd like Mindy is and may not be pronouncing it the way that it is supposed to be.
True. And we haven't really talked about Jurian a whole lot.
Ooh, that's true.
So I wanted to look up and see, what his name meant. And it's actually the medieval German form of George. And it means earth worker.
If his name was George in the book, I would have not taken that seriously. Well, I got George in my ring over here. He seduced my sister.
I got George's eye going crazy. Jurian is smart, sweet, childish, funny, bipolar, a little fatty. That's just thrown in there.
How can you tell that from an eye?
I don't know. It's just thrown in there. Determined, joyful, and is curious in his own little world type of person.
That is quite an injury.
I mean, in your defense, he is in his own little world.
He is in his own little world.
Yeah. Too soon.
Someone who takes pleasure in the retention and expulsion of feces.
Oh my gosh.
The retention?
Yeah.
Like, do you store it or do you not let it out?
I think you don't let it out. Or maybe it's constipated.
That's what my toddler's doing.
That poor thing.
I know. What was the very first part of that?
They take someone who takes pleasure in the retention and expulsion.
So
of
they
feces.
just like really enjoy their bowel movements.
I think
and
that's
like
what
the digestive process.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yes, but holding it can hurt.
That is so weird.
Your lower intestines. You're not supposed to hold it.
Well, apparently somebody gets pleasure out of that.
Ew.
They're also going to have a stomach ache and have to go to pelvic floor therapy.
Yeah, they probably will.
Poor Jurian.
I'm really disturbed by that second entry.
Isn't that a nice one to end on?
One thing I have appreciated. One thing I've appreciated about these nerdiest vocabulary and deep dives is that I think that I thought that Sarah J just made up all these names, like just out of her imagination. And now I'm realizing that
there's a purpose.
There's, she researched. She researched, and they have meaning and connections. And
well, in your defense, a lot of authors we like say that they just make it up.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're not as deep as Sarah Janet.
Maybe like subliminally. That's not the right word. Subconsciously. Thank you. So we're going to talk about just kind of overall favorite things, least favorite things, revelations for the book as a whole. What is your favorite moment or your favorite twist?
So mine was actually just a very small moment that I had kind of forgotten about and just really, really solidified for me how early on I actually did start liking Rhysand. And it's after the second trial when he kind of talks to Feyre over the bond and he's encouraging her to keep her head up in front of Amarantha and just to keep going until she gets back by herself. I loved that. I just loved that moment between them. It's kind of a small moment, but it definitely like stuck with me. And then the other one I had was another little small moment. It was kind of a twist, but I loved the moment when Lady Autumn helped Feyre. I'd forgotten about that as well.
Oh, yeah.
That is a really sweet moment.
That's a nice moment. I think my favorite moment is Callan May when she meets when she meets Rhysand.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one,
Even the first time I read the book, I was like 100% on the Tamlin train, but that scene really stood out to me a lot. And the first time I read it, I thought that it was just something that was supposed to stand out because Rhysand becomes so important under the mountain. But obviously, you find out later that it's much, much more than that. But it always stood out to me like, ooh, who's the hot guy that,
why was he waiting for me?
Yeah, like he did help her, right? Like she was in trouble, and that always just stood out to me.
Fortunately for Mindy and I, Whitney keeps us all organized and sent us these questions for us to, think about what we wanted to say. So when she put, what was your favorite moment or twist? I didn't think about the book. I thought about the podcast, and I wanted to bring up that one time that Whitney said fuck twice in one episode.
Stop.
That was my favorite moment and twist.
That was a twist, wasn't it?
The last 6 months. I was like, wait, you just said fuck twice. What's happening?
Before we even got it out of our mouths.
I know, right?
I was feeling some kind of way.
Yes, you were.
The fucking was coming.
That's hilarious. So let's talk about our favorite spicy scene.
I picked the spiciest scene I could think of in this book.
Which was what?
So to me, the hottest scene is when Rhys kisses Feyre. And so like when you're first reading it.
In the hallway?
In the back room or whatever.
Yeah.
Because when you first read it, you're kind of pissed. You're like, oh, what the fuck is he doing? And then when you do the reread, knowing he wasn't just being a dick and he actually had feelings for her, it's hot.
So I had put, I don't have one in this book
in
because
the book,
none of them really did anything for me. I assumed Tamlin was probably a Minuteman, and then I felt like Rhysand was forcing himself on her. But I mean, if I get to open it up to all 5 books, it's definitely Hold On to the Headboard.
Ooh.
Book 5.
Silver Flames.
Silver Flames.
I would say in the first book, I like it when he licks her face.
Oh.
I know I'm in the minority there.
Spoiler alert.
No. In your defense, I didn't say I didn't like it.
I do like that. I didn't ever like the first sex scene with Feyre and Tamlin, and I don't really know why. It just always made me feel kind of like icky.
I do like the.
I felt like it was kind of rushed.
It was, and I do like this sex scene at the beginning of book 2 that they have she and Tamlin. That's a pretty good scene.
that's a better. I think that's a better.
Right, because he built up some stamina and endurance. And that's why it felt rushed, because it was
Opening it up to the whole series. The whole series. This is quickly becoming my favorite moment. No, I would say Silver Flames also. First of all of them in Silver Flames, but the dining room right before Azriel walks in and.
But while we're talking about that, and I won't say this is my favorite spicy scene, but it's seen a lot in the fandom and something I always defend whenever Nesta tells Cassian that he's quick off the mark.
Yeah.
And I always say, I'm like, well, I would be too.
How about your least favorite moment or least favorite twist? I feel like there's a lot to choose from after discussing it as in depth as we have.
Well, spoiler alert, one of mine was when he licked her fucking tears.
No, I I liked
God,
it.
it just creeped me out. But the rest of my other ones is every time that Tamlin bites somebody. Ew.
It does happen a lot more than you would think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think my least favorite is the limerick. The limerick just makes me so upset.
It's not the fiddle?
It's, well, oh my gosh, I hadn't even thought about the fiddle. They're going to have to
She
be
had
like...
drowned it out.
I blocked it out of my brain. No, the fiddle is just, I still find it so embarrassing. But the limerick just makes me so mad. Like,
Yeah.
teach the child how to read,
Yeah.
right? Like, don't just write her dirty poems. Write the dirty poems and then also teach her how to read the dirty poems. But it just upsets me.
So I'm allowed to have 3, right?
Sure.
Of course.
Okay. So one of my least favorite moments was honestly one of my favorite moments too, and it's the music under the mountain. So Feyre is feeling so hopeless during that time and really close to letting go. She wants to die. She's about to break, and it reminded me so much of my own deep depression before I went to therapy and start. And I won't say I ever wanted to let go, but depression does make you feel very, very hopeless. So I think Sarah J. Maas does a really good job of explaining how that feels, but I also really hate it because it makes me it makes my stomach hurt. On a less serious moment, kissing of the fucking eyelids. Who does that? I would much rather have my face licked than
Me
someone
too.
kiss my eyelids.
Agreed.
I'm not on board with either.
And then
Let
number
the record
3,
stand.
Stay away from the face.
Number
Unless
3,
it's my mouth.
Number 3 would be Tamlin trying to screw Feyre in that closet instead of helping her escape. I've never
yeah.
been so mad at a character than in that moment when he could have just helped her get out.
Yeah. And it still surprises me when I think back to the very first time I read this book, and that just...
Like, they're gonna do it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's so sweet. He just wants to kiss her. And then later I'm like, oh, yeah, why didn't he try to get her out? And then it makes me feel stupid that I didn't even, just like Feyre, like I didn't even think about it.
But, I mean, Sarah J. Maas does that on purpose. She
Right.
wants you to feel that way, and she's a good writer, and she makes you feel that way.
So I was just being a good reader, really.
Yes.
I was doing a good job.
You did a good job, Whit.
Thank you so much. How about the biggest revelation from this book one?
So, for me, it's actually a couple of theories that you all had.
Ooh.
So, my first one is Deb's serial hunt theory.
That's mine too.
Yeah, like that just blew my mind. And then the other is from our final episode. The Beast is reselling Tamlin as Gaston.
Ooh.
That blew my mind as well. Those were the two
I'm so flattered.
that I
Thank you.
remember going, oh,
Yeah.
that's kind of amazing. So yeah, those are my two revelations.
So I will say my biggest revelation too was the theory that I put together that Hunt from Crescent City might actually be the Suriel, and I'll create an infographic and post it with this episode because I do talk for like 15 minutes about it on that episode, and so I want to make it a little more bite-sized for you. And it also supports the theory that we've talked about from the beginning that Crescent City actually happens before ACOTAR in the timeline. And I wanted to point it out, and I wrote this down so I wouldn't forget to say it. I know at times she has said that they might be on the same timeline. So this fandom does not need to fucking come at me because she lies sometimes so that to throw us off.
That's
like all
true.
authors do. Like, why would she tell us her biggest secrets? And
Right.
that's a cool thing about a book like this is we can all kind of have our own theories. And you know what? When I'm right, you guys can say thanks.
I think my biggest revelation, I was trying to think back to when I read it the first time, right? And like what really surprised me. And it, for me, was when Feyre goes back to her family's new, estate before she goes under the mountain and finds out that Nesta came after her and tried to cross the wall for her. Because, we've talked a lot about how Nesta is described as Feyre in this first book, especially as just kind of like a super bitch. Mm-hmm. And it's really surprising to Feyre and to the reader that Nesta would do that for her. So
yeah, it is very different when you go back and read that after you've read Silver Flames and realize, knowing everything you know about Nesta then, how different that scene feels.
Yeah, and I think too, that same scene, but reading it this time and putting together all the stuff, all the information that we've read in all of the books, especially Silver Flames, and putting it all together in that list that we talked about of like, okay, let's think about what Nesta's dealing with. I think that was a big revelation for me this time, right? Like it's because it's a lot that she's dealing with. Okay, so I wanted to talk about listener theories because I have a few friends listening to this podcast, and I'll shout you out in just a second, that shared a few things that I just thought were really interesting. Some of them are just thoughts and theories, but I thought that they were really cool, and I wanted to share them with you guys too. So the first thing is from my mom. Shout out to Linnell. When she listened to the episode where we talked about the bogey, aka the bog, she said maybe she picked that pronunciation because of the military term for bogey, which, as I understand it, was or is used to talk about like an enemy missile or like an enemy ship or something. So a bogey in that form would be an enemy who wants to cause you harm and is like aiming toward you specifically to cause you harm.
And remind everyone what the bogey is in case they're not as nerdy as us. The
bogey in Akatar is a creature that kind of goes up to Feyre while she and Lucian are riding their horses on like a trail or something, and is saying, "Look at me, open your eyes, look at me," because he wanted to devour her, right? Like if you look at it, it gives it permission somehow to attack you, which I kind of thought fit with that military term, right? Like coming directly to you to cause you harm. And I just thought that was really interesting, and I was super impressed by that. So shout out to my mom. And then I have a couple of friends that I went to college with that have been texting me as they listen to episodes. And my friend Amanda, shout out to Amanda, she texted me recently. She was listening to the episode where we're talking about Feyre doesn't know how to read, right? And how I like go off about Tamlin never teaching her. And she told me she theorizes that perhaps Tamlin doesn't realize that she can't read. And I was like, oh, what are you talking about? And she said when Tamlin talks about it, he only talks about it in terms of her writing. When Feyre talks about it, Feyre is the one that talks about reading. So she theorizes maybe he doesn't realize that she truly cannot read and only thinks that she doesn't know how to write. I didn't go back, and reread all of those sections, but maybe.
I do feel like, though, I don't know.
I don't know.
When you're learning how to read, you're also learning how to write.
Well, maybe in the Fae world.
This is true.
They do it differently. I'm not sure, but
I do have to remind myself that this is fiction.
I know, right?
And this is not the Earth world. It's not our world. So it's okay to suspend your disbelief a little bit.
Someone posted in one of the book groups on Facebook this week that she was irritated that Cassian talks about lactic acid.
Yeah,
and I wrote, well, to play the devil's advocate, maybe they already know about it there, and we don't actually know when this takes place.
That's true.
So they do have, running water, which is a modern thing. Right.
Yeah.
And so.
But they don't know how to do a C-section.
Right. Which I think was kind of her point.
Yeah.
Like,
But again, this is not our world. This is a different world.
So my friend Kristen, shout out to Kristen. She sent me a couple of different messages that I wanted to share, and one of them made me laugh because we were talking about, I think it was the episode that's titled "I'm Not a Tamlin Apologist." She messaged me. She said, "I think I am a Tamlin apologist," which made me laugh.
What was her name again?
Her name's Kristen.
Boo! I'm kidding, Kristen.
So this is what she said about Tamlin, about cutting Tamlin a little more slack, basically. This is a quote. I'm gonna read it. The very end of this message made me laugh. She said, Tamlin endured, and these are all true points.
We'll see.
To point that out at the beginning. Tamlin endured 50 years of Amarantha, the weight of the Fae race on his shoulders, and then his own under the mountain trauma. I guess I just don't think he is any less understanding of her trauma than she is of his. I think she's quite whiny and bratty in book 2. Oops, LOL. And that made me laugh. Oops. That made me laugh a lot.
I would say that all the Fae under the mountain for the 49 years have more trauma than he does.
Maybe.
I'm just saying.
But trauma is trauma, I
Yeah.
guess. And then this is the last one that I wanted to share. She was listening to us talking about the Under the Mountain and Rhysand, and how Rhysand treats her like his property like a tool, that kind of thing. She said, I'm listening to the most recent episode. There's a lot of focus on Rhys using her as a tool, the wraiths assaulting her, no consent, treating her like property, etc. I was trying to evaluate why none of this really bothered me, and if I'm not a good person.
Oh, you are.
She said, but I've determined I still think it's fine. They don't have time for all that. This is an incredibly dangerous, incredibly high-stakes situation they're all in. He doesn't have time to be getting her consent and convincing her he's not evil and hoping that she's a good enough actress to pull it off. This is why I give Tamlin so much grace, too. They haven't been able to relax and be normal for 50 years. Anyway, not that y'all care about my opinion. That's just why none of that bothers me.
We do. We do care.
I know. It made me, but I was like, I mean, those are true things.
Yeah, I do like it when somebody else makes me kind of question and think about, it doesn't mean it's going to change my mind, but it might. I mean, you never know.
I think in one of the early episodes, I said something to the effect of like, I want to be able to look at these characters as complete characters, right? And not only focus on the good things of Rhysand and never talk about the negative things, and not only focus on the negative things of Tamlin and never talk about the good things, right? And that the messages like that and different perspectives help me be able to do that. And I loved it. So thank you guys for sending those thoughts. Please continue to do so.
Keep them coming.
And if you've never sent thoughts, send them to us because we really like reading.
So I had a few too, since we're doing actual shout outs. So my friend Carrie, she got like halfway through season 1 and she texted me and she's like, can I give you some constructive criticism? And I was like, no. But I wrote, sure, smiley face. And this was just her own thing. Because I thought she was about to say, like, your voice gets on my nerves or something like that. And I'm like, oh, my God. So she told me that she thought she was a fantasy book nerd, but we proved that she really isn't very geeky. And she said, I like Outlander, they travel in time, and I like Time Traveler's Wife. And she's like, but I don't fucking care about all the lore and everything. And I told her, I was like, that's cool. Just listen
don't
to the
have
bonus
to.
episode. Yeah. And so then we've had we've really grown some Bookstagram relationships. If you're not following us, it's literally our nerdiest thing, all one word. And we are on Bookstagram all day. We love interacting with you. But there is we've had a couple people say how much they love our friendship, which is really nice to hear because I think we do have a really wonderful
We love our friendship
15
too.
years of friendship. Yeah. But there's someone named Tonks_Padfoot_Mooney, which shout out to you. So she commented this week that we have the best friendship. And I was like, we do have the best friendship.
Thank you, Tonks.
So then my friend Marcy, I actually saw her last week and she said, you know what you've done to me? And I said, oh God, what? Like, do I make you horny? Like, what is it? And she said that we've turned her into a reader.
Oh, yay.
Oh, that's awesome.
That was probably the best compliment that we could have gotten this season.
That's so
and
good.
she can't wait to, she said, I'm kind of stressing because I feel like I have to read From Blood and Ash before the season starts. I was like, you might want to.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie, but like she got super into the whole ACOTAR series.
That's awesome.
And she's on Goodreads now.
Yay.
And like, yeah, so I was really, really excited.
Shout out to Marcy. That's the one I met, right?
Well, yeah. Welcome to the dark side, honey.
Yay.
Yeah, that's I think that's the best outcome for people, for a podcast like this, for people to start reading, right? Like that's,
and read what you like. I don't care what other people think.
Right.
The cool thing about Bookstagram is there's like, romance pages. There's pages like ours that are super nerdy. There's like some super like praise kink pages, which I think are so fucking funny, by the way. And like, it's just a community that supports each other and the authors interact. It's a fun community. So just get on there and talk to people. And like, I don't care what you're reading as long as you read.
yes.
Yeah.
Just read something.
Read something you enjoy.
I mean, hell, I read hockey porn.
I just got done with Hooked by Emily McIntyre, and we're going to get to meet her this week. I'm really, really excited, but it's a lot of praise kink. And I was reading it at my husband's 95th grandmother's birthday party today, and someone walked in, and again, I'm just reading, right? And it just says Hooked on the front. It doesn't have anything bad or anything. But she's like, what are you reading? And I was like, and it was like on a real nasty scene. And I said, oh, it's a Peter Pan retelling. It's real neat.
like the Disney movie.
There's no murder or, sex or anything in here.
It was his grandmother's 95th birthday.
What did I say?
You 95th grandmother.
He has 95 grandmas.
Well,
Which normally I would not point that out,
she
but
turned
that
95, which I
made
think
me
is
laugh.
awesome.
So let's talk about just our overall grade for just this first book.
I'll be honest. The first time I read this, I gave it like 2.5 stars. And it wasn't because I didn't love it. It was honestly because I felt like leading up to Under the Mountain took too long. Right. And I mean, honestly, now that we've read all 5 books, we know that was needed. Right. And so at that time, I gave it a much lower score. I do think this is the type of book that you have to read the whole series and then honestly go back and read it again, because now it's a 3 or 4 star book for me, knowing what I know. Right. And so I actually, when I finished it, when we were recording, I went in and changed my Goodreads score because I do feel really differently about it now. Yeah. And, having the other books to come back to and, putting all of that together about Nesta and learning more about Tamlin's trauma and all of that, it makes it really, really special.
Mine changed also, but in a very different way. So when I first read this, I am a very fast reader, and I read for the story, and the story hooked me. Like I just really got into it, and I liked it. I liked where it ended up. I liked all the complexity of the characters, and I actually gave it 5 stars the first time I read it because I went back to Goodreads and saw what I gave it. Then I reread it again for the second time. And knowing everything I knew, I would say I would give it 2.5, maybe 3 stars as well the second time I read it. Now, when we read it this time, I'm changing it again because when I read it with a critical eye and doing the deep dives, I really have a better appreciation for the book within the anthology. So I think overall it's a 4 for me.
But you and I read it. When
we were in Australia.
I was going to say British. When you and I read this, it had just come out. I think book 2 had just been released when we read this at the time. And think of how much has changed in almost 8 years since we read it. We've gone through a pandemic.
Yeah.
Our lives have changed drastically. You're almost about to have no kids in the house,
right?
Like I have kids in high school now. And I think also our point of view on life is really different.
Definitely. It makes me want to kind of go back and look at what I rated some other books. I mean, I'm not going to do this because that would take me forever. But wonder if I would still rate. I wonder if I would still rate some of the other books I've read the same.
I think the first time I read this book, I would have given it like a B plus grade. I think I would have given it like 3 or 4 stars because I enjoyed it. But when I finished the book for the first time I read it, it was just kind of like, I mean, that was fine.
Right. That's how I felt too.
It wasn't like the most amazing book I've ever read.
I read it super fast and it was super enjoyable, but it wasn't something that I couldn't stop thinking about.
Right. Yeah, me too. And so then reading the whole series, I enjoyed it a lot more, as like you said, Mindy, about when you understand everything that's going on and there's so much complexity to it, and you do gain an appreciation when you know the whole story. But it's still not my favorite just because I know the whole story. So I don't need all the world building. I don't need all of the introduction to the characters. I appreciate the book for its complexity and how it works within the whole series. But I would still probably give it like a B or 3 or 4 stars. Like I do enjoy it more and more and more the more that I read it, because I always notice something different, right? There's always some kind of, oh, that's what's going on there.
Well, and I don't understand. I think people that don't reread books don't read these types of books.
No,
yes. Because there's always more to unpack. Because not to call you out, how many times have you read this book?
Like 8.
Okay, right. So the fact that you're still finding new things is really, really exciting.
Yeah, and it's like the appreciation for it. As far as the story itself, it's it's not my favorite in the series, but you have to have it. It's the first one. It's not
my favorite either, but
yeah.
Well, wouldn't you say it's the same for Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's because there is so much world building and so much that you don't notice as you go through these books, and they become like these, lifelong things that people pass down to their kids, which I think is super duper fun, because Harry Potter, for example, spans across all age ranges.
Yes.
Which is really exciting.
Kids are still picking it up.
Right. Yep. And I wouldn't say ACOTAR can do that. It gets a little nasty, which I'm okay with. But, especially this first book, I think a lot of ages can read it and really understand it. And it's special.
This first book is more of a YA book than the other ones.
I do think that's technically, if you go to Barnes & Noble, this is still in YA.
Yeah. Some of the other ones are too.
Harry Potter's the same way, just not on the same level. I think like
it's violence with those.
Exactly. Like once you hit book 5, it gets really dark.
It does.
If you think about, like, it's essentially genocide
Yeah.
is what they're doing, right?
Yes.
And it's terrifying
Yeah.
when you make those parallels in those
Because we
books.
have kids, like, there are kids, you know, at our school in the 2nd grade who can read the Harry Potter series. And, you know, we let kids check out whatever they want because we're not that kind of library where we're like, we're not going to tell kids what they want to read. But we try to gear them towards ones that are more their level. Just because you can read something doesn't mean you should.
Right.
And so kids that get hooked on it that early, we try to kind of like, oh, why don't you try something else once they get to like book 5 and 6? Because it really is a lot darker
It is.
than
It's
the other
heavy.
ones.
Well, so let's talk about the series a little bit. Thinking about all of the ACOTAR books, so we've got the first, A Court of Thorns and Roses. Book 2 is A Court of Mist and Fury. Book 3 is A Court of Wings and Ruin. Book 4-ish is the little novella, A Court of Frost and Starlight.
That's
And
Deb's
then
favorite.
book 5, or book 4, if you don't count the novella, is A Court of Silver Flames. So out of the whole series, which one is your all's favorite?
For spice level and character redemption, I would say A Court of Silver Flames. But if I look at it all as a whole and overall, like the story and the revelations and that kind of stuff, I would say A Court of Mist and Fury is my favorite.
I would say that too. It's when you meet the inner circle. Feyre starts working through some of her trauma under the mountain, and the Rhysand character development comes out, and you learn about his end game, which is, continues on through the rest of the books too, and everything that they're trying to do. And you figure out that, yes, he kind of saw her as a tool for the war in the beginning, but now he sees her as a partner. And I think that's really, really amazing to read, and Rhysand especially is just a really great character.
And I feel like that book's sort of the cornerstone for the rest of it.
Right.
Yeah, no, I agree. However,
I know what your favorite book is.
I know my favorite book is Frost and Star. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. It's Silver Flames. I just love it. I love Mist and Fury. That will always hold like a special piece of my heart because it is such a like, whoa, like kind of experience.
Again, what was it?
Whoa, the first time you read it.
You reminded me so much of your son right then. Can't you see him saying that? Whoa.
He would be thrilled to hear that. But no, Silver Flames is just, it's characters that I love that are kind of settled in who they are as characters and getting more confident and finding their power literally and coming into their own. And I love Cassian. I love Cassian so much. I made that little noise. My headphones fell off, everybody. No, I love Cassian and I love Nesta and I love their relationship. I love that it's much more complex and not quite so storybook as I feel like Feyre and Rhysand's is. So I love Silver Flames. Last but not least, I just wanted to have all three of us talk a little bit about why we love this series and this book so much because, you know, talking about this book at dinner on our girls' trip is where we started talking about doing a podcast, right? And we picked this book to be our first book for our first season for a reason. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. Like why is it so special?
Sarah J. Maas is just a brilliant storyteller. I believe in her world. Her world building is phenomenal without being like overly complicated because I've been reading a lot of like fantasy books lately and sometimes it gets like too much, like I can't keep up. With hers, it was just enough of a slow burn that I could get behind everything. I felt like a part of the world. I could imagine it, you know? And then her characters are so wondrously flawed in like the very best way possible. I get new insights every time I read them. And I'm not a rereader either. Like I don't typically reread things because in my mind, I've got enough sitting on my TBR that I need to like make a little chunk in that. I don't need to be rereading stuff I've already read, but I do enjoy rereading these books. And I just never get tired of them.
I think for me, the world building is so expansive and so interesting and not really something. I mean, there's a lot of Fae literature out right now, which I'm so happy about, by the way. But 8 years ago, there wasn't a lot out like this, which is why I think it captivated so many people. And this is a huge, huge, huge spoiler. So I'm just putting that out there if you want to, plug your ears for 30 seconds. Having Akatar and Crescent City turn into a multiverse was just brilliant and so shocking to fans and just really, really smart. And as I was writing my notes, I was like, they should put her on Marvel because that's getting a little stale. And I think she could, bring it back to where it needs to be. But I love that there's Easter eggs all through all three of her series, right? So Throne of Glass, Crescent City, and Akatar. And honestly, this is the only series where I annotate in my book because so much of it crosses over and I want to make notes about, why are there Rune Mountains in Throne of Glass?
Yeah.
Right. And so it's just, I don't know. It's easy to love.
I agree with all of that. She is a brilliant writer. I love the complexity of the story. I'm going to get a little bit more personal with why I love this book and this series so much too. And I might cry. I really might, but I'm going to try really hard not to. So you guys read this book a long time ago. I read this book way more recently. I've always been a reader and I've always loved to read. And that has always been my stress reliever and escape. And then, having a full-time job and having a kid took a lot of that time away, right? And I basically just stopped reading things that I enjoyed. I was reading stuff that were nonfiction or things for work or the books I was teaching as a high school English teacher, but not just stuff for me. And you guys encouraged me to read this book and to read this series, and I did. I really might cry. I'm sorry if I do. But I had my daughter and my second baby and had a really hard time after she was born and continued to have a hard time through COVID. And reading this book and reading this series really sparked that love for reading in me again. And I started reading just for me and stuff that I wanted to read and stuff that I enjoyed. And I mean, it has truly been a lifeline for me the past few years and a lifesaver for me the past few years. So this book, the series, these books will always hold a really special place for me and you guys too.
But we know we're special.
Because I mean, I don't know what I would be doing with my time. And I don't know what my mental health would look like if I hadn't started doing that again and having that peace that's just for me, right? And not Whitney as a mom or Whitney as a wife and having to do all this, cleaning the house and all this stuff that we have to do all day, every day. I just am very appreciative
That's
of it.
really special.
We love you.
Thanks for sharing.
I love you guys. So now
I just felt like we were on Delicious Dish. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you for sharing that. So now I guess it's time to share our nerdiest thing of the week.
Why don't you go first? Because yours is the best.
Okay.
I don't know what yours is, Mindy, but I already know this story and it's really good.
So this is really embarrassing. I'm reading the Bonds That Tie series and I'm almost done with book 5 and it's been 3 days, maybe 3 or 4 days. So I had a doctor's appointment a couple days ago. And so I brought my Kindle with me because I knew I was going to be waiting in the waiting room. So I'm just reading my Bonds That Tie book and I'm sitting in the room waiting for the doctor to come in. And all of a sudden the book turned super spicy.
And I mean, she sent me a screenshot and I was like,
it is super graphic, extremely detailed, Silver Flames level and beyond,
I
right?
think of the word as graphic as negative, and I would say it was very
explicit.
Detailed.
Yeah, it's very explicit.
It was nice.
It's explicitly detailed, right? It does not leave anything to the imagination. It's very descriptive. And there was no build up to that scene. It just all of a sudden happened. And so I didn't know that I was going to be sitting in my doctor's office room, reading a scene like this, right?
This is book 2,
so
right?
I think it was book 2. Yeah. Yes, it was. It was because I texted you guys later and I was like,
well, you can't say which Bond it was. You don't want to spoil it for anyone.
Right. But it was intense. So all of a sudden the doctor walks in, who thank God is a woman. And I was like, oh, hello. And just quickly put my Kindle away, whatever. So she immediately takes my blood pressure and she was like, honey, your blood pressure is kind of high. And I was so embarrassed. I did not be like, yeah, I just was reading a real hot sex scene.
See, I would have told her.
I would have too.
Not.
Because I didn't want her to, next time I come in, her be like, well, we need to watch your blood pressure.
Right.
It wasn't that high. It was the top number that's right then. And, your heart rate is up. and I was
do you remember what your heart rate was?
Yeah, it was 134. It was like 134 over like 60 something. And I was like, that's so weird. I don't know why it would be like that. But I did not tell her why. But she was like, let's just, it's not like concerning. It's just high, a little high. And I was like, okay. And it was super embarrassing. But I did go home and I texted you guys immediately. And I told my husband, like, he was like, that is really embarrassing for you.
Now, do you want to go to the bedroom?
He's like, so go keep reading that book. Yeah. So anyway, my turn's over.
Well, mine's not nearly as exciting, but I have two. The first one is super nerdy, and I don't like to wear belts because they're like really clunky and weird in the front, and I always feel like it just looks weird.
And we only like to be clunky in the back.
Yeah. So because I don't wear my shirts tucked in or anything. I think if I did, it wouldn't be as big of a deal. But I struggle with pants. I have a very square frame, and my pants don't stay on my. I know they're all laughing at me.
This is just such a random thing.
When she said that too, I'm thinking SpongeBob SquarePants.
No, I technically have a square frame, which means I have no curves. Like I don't have a waist. Everything's really straight. So pants fall off of me, and it's very embarrassing. And all day long, I'm hiking up my pants, and it's really frustrating. So I bought these things, and they're called. This is the nerdy part. They're called Belt Bros.
Oh my God.
They're these Velcro straps that like you hook on into your belt loops, and it cinches your waist.
But does it work?
It does.
Well,
I'm
there you
like
go.
super stoked about it.
I want to know why they're not belt gals.
I know.
was just going to say, let's call it belt bitches.
Belt bitches.
I like that much better.
The belt bitches hook you right in.
Exactly.
My other nerdy thing is a couple podcasts ago, I think I mentioned that I made the most impulse buy that I've ever made, and I bought these Bat Boys cookies that were themed after the Bat Boys, and I brought them in tonight, and we indulged in them a little bit, and they were very, very
And
good.
my husband wouldn't eat any.
I know.
He was like, I feel like it's not for
I
me.
feel dirty.
I did feel dirty with the General. Is that what it's called? The one
Yes.
that's supposed to be for Cassian? Because
It definitely has a creamy center.
Yeah. See, that's what, calling it a creamy center. I'm just like, I mean, I know what they're doing, but it
was
made me
so
feel
good,
kind
though.
of gross.
It made my
favorite one.
center feel that way.
The High Lord tasted delicious.
2 podcasts ago, I talked about my nerdiest thing being getting a new book journal. And the hard thing is, like, I order them online because I can't find what I want at the bookstore. And of course, I got it and I spent $35 on it. And I didn't realize I didn't like it until I started writing in it. I'm like, I don't like it. It felt like, this is stupid, but the pages were thin like a dictionary. And they need to be like cardstock, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it was, I didn't know it was alphabetized like a address book. And my books go in sequential order in my reading journal.
Yeah.
There were just a lot of first world problems with this book. So I made my own. I made my own book journal this week.
Cool.
Yeah, I found there's a really cool, I'll put the Etsy shop in our show notes, but a really cool like printable book journal. And then I've been making wooden journals anyway. And so I made my own cover and got tabs and like made it exactly what I wanted it to
that.
be.
Cool.
So, and then our nerdiest cocktail, since it is our big finale tonight, which is sad but also really exciting. It's been a really wonderful first season. So our cocktail is called The Big Finale. It's a scoop of chocolate ice cream, a shot of espresso mixer, a shot of chocolate liqueur, a shot of vodka, blend with ice, and imbibe. It's very, very delicious. We also put another scoop of ice cream on top.
It was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really, really was. So it's been a wonderful first season.
It really has. It's been a lot of fun.
I've really enjoyed this.
I have too. I'm
It's kind
excited
of the
to keep
highlight. It's
going.
been the highlight of my every week
It
is
has-
to come spend
it
time
has
with you
for me
ladies.
too. It's nice to have stuff that's just for you, right?
Yes.
Like just because you enjoy it and like to do it. I like it a lot.
We have a lot of new things coming up on the horizon, though.
We
for
do.
season 2.
Next week, we're going to drop the trailer for season 2. And the week after that is going to be a special bonus episode about Scarlett St. Clair, the event we went to in Lexington a few weeks back, and her book, The King of Battle and Blood.
And then also for for season 2, we have a cocktail sponsor. So we'll be having some fresh cocktails and we'll be announcing that really soon.
That's
and
exciting.
then the really big news is during season 2, we will be moderating the panels at the Imaginarium Book Festival in DC, which we're really, really
Yay!
excited about. I do believe they're sold out of VIP tickets, but general admission is free. So you can definitely come, and we'll have a table there, and we would love to meet you. And the two ladies that work on this event are just so spectacular
They're
and so
amazing.
fun. And so we can't wait to do that. That's going to be our girls trip this year.
Yeah, and go follow them on Instagram.
Yeah, please do.
Imaginarium Book Festival is their
And if you're not following
Their
us,
handle.
come follow us. We're just as funny online.
That's our nerdiest thing, on Instagram. But I guess that's it for season 1.
Goodbye.
It's a wrap.
See you
Yeah.
for get your copy of From Blood and Ash. Go
Yes.
ahead and
Yes.
start reading about Hawk and Poppy. You will not be sad, I promise. Bye.
Bye.
For exclusive content and to keep up with all things nerdy, follow us on Instagram at Our Nerdiest Thing. We post book reviews, what to read next, and our cocktail recipes. Have something nerdy that you'd like to share? Email us at ournerdiestthing@gmail.com. This podcast is edited and produced by The Story Guides. Thanks for listening.